Welcome back. Taxing the rich to feed the poor. We're not talking about Robin Hood, but one expectation of what our finance minister will do when he announces his budget speech on Wednesday. South Africans have received significant tax breaks since 1995, but the party could be coming to an end, and the wealthy, as some expect, to be targets as government seeks to bring in more cash. South Africa's debt is rising, which means that Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene is likely to be very constrained when it comes to spending. Well, let's chat further. Let's look ahead to Wednesday. We're joined by Lesiba Mothatha from Investment Solutions. Great to have you with us, Lesiba. So we always say that the poor finance minister has this balancing act. This time it does seem to be very tough because we've got low growth, we've got debt, we've got less revenue coming in. How bad is it when a lot of people talk about the deteriorating public finances?
Well, they are in quite a state, and one needs to now think about what do we do in this scenario. Do we prioritize growth or do we hurt it further? So what we have learned from what the minister said last year in the October medium-term budget policy statement is that more revenue need to be collected. It could be through tax hikes. They talked about methodologies of improving collections. So we need to see whether it's the right policy to be talking about tax hikes when your GDP in a structural format. If you think about potential GDP at 3% and now you're sitting at 2.3, it can be a better number tomorrow when GDP comes out, but be as it may, you're still below potential GDP and you're going to be hiking taxes. I don't know if that's the right way.
So you think it's a bad idea, clearly. Is there any other option to bring more money in?
Well, the thing about economics is that in order to get revenue into the coffers, you need to generate growth. And the way you do it, you need to support it in many ways. Think back in the 1970s, when GDP globally was lackluster, what do? They cut taxes, they privatized some of the state-owned enterprises that were chowing the money. They were draining the fiscus as opposed to generating more income. They also increased interest rates during Volcker, the Fed chairman, who raised interest rates to a high level because higher real rates attract capital and that generates more capital formation. That's how you get out of a rut of low economic activity. I think that's what we need to be talking about here. We're having a situation where state-owned enterprises are continually draining on the fiscus. We have a situation where now we're talking about tax hikes. Well, the opposite should have been true. And now we have some real rates that are positive. That's good for the economy, so we don't need to do much on the monetary side.
Practically, could he really cut taxes even, like you're saying, and say, let's just spur on growth? Because aren't you talking about sort of a long-term effect when we're in a fix with this budget basically not balancing right now?
Well, why is it not balancing? We are spending money and borrowing. So we need to borrow money and spend it on capital formation, not on consumption-led, debt-driven situations, which we'll find ourselves. So what we are borrowing and that which we are spending money on needs to be clearly on capital formation. That way you increase your economic activity and the productivity of your economy, which will lead you to higher growth. I think it's even right to discuss it now. We have a plan. We put down an NDP which suggests we should be growing at 5% growth. It's either we're going to walk away from it and say we can't do it, it's too impossible, or we're going to try to get to it. I want to see whether that will come through. At the rate at which we're going now, and the resignation in the entire South Africa now that we need higher taxes, I'm struggling with that. Because there's no way you're going to get growth when you're constraining your consumer. Worse, if it comes constraining your corporates, right? That would be very problematic.
So unlikely to raise corporate taxes, maybe other taxes which you don't love the idea. You're talking about doing things in a different way. And a lot of people have said that. We keep on saying we need growth, saying we need jobs, but nothing changes. So what is that radical move? Is it announcing that we will finally let investors take up parts of Eskom?
It's partly that. I do think that there's a need to rejuvenate the state-owned enterprise sector. It's in a crisis.
Is privatization the answer?
I think so. I'm not talking about wholesale privatization, where every single part of the state-owned enterprise needs to be owned by the private sector. But you need to infuse it with the private commercial thinking. We cannot continue to spend public money into entities that have a lot of capital, a lot of assets. They can do much more, but we could continue to spend public money.
And they're sapping. They're sapping
becomes
public
problematic.
Money. He has said that there could be the sale of non-strategic assets.
Right.
Do you know what those are?
Well, when we interpret that, it could have been towards funding the ESCOM need on capital. It was not very clear what happened. This discussion came in October. We've had nothing since, and we look for, he has said a few things at Davos about that we can continue to try to fund from non-core assets, but no detail has arrived. We're hoping that it comes through when we hear the speech on Wednesday.
Let's come back to taxes, because there is this opportunity because the fuel price has fallen. Right. So maybe we'll see a further tax levy. Yeah. Is that dangerous, because the oil price and our fuel price could go up again?
Yeah. Well, so I think it makes sense now to increase taxes from a fuel levy perspective, in order to fund a lot of things, including...
So the least evil tax at the moment. I think
so. I think it's an opportunity to do so. Remember, low oil prices will make consumers spend more. There'll be some household consumption expenditure benefit from this lower oil price, which will boost the economic activity. From that front, it makes sense to be paying taxes from that way. But income tax, these are structural. VAT, once you take it up, it takes a long time to come down.
Yeah, that's a huge problem. And he won't, if everybody who's analysed the situation is to be believed, he won't touch corporate tax, because like you say, the corporates are already in trouble. We're not getting in the tax that we used to from our companies. Yeah. And that's because of lower profits. Why? Just explain the situation. Right. Why are companies in this state? And what is the solution to get them investing again and employing people again?
Well, it's a global phenomenon. If you look at it, we're in what they call secular stagnation globally. You find the US is growing subpar. Eurozone is in a lackluster growth situation. China is slowing. So it's a global phenomenon where you're finding that economic activity is not as robust as it was before the great financial crisis of 2008. So that's where we find ourselves. Where we are now in South Africa, we are now structurally in a very low economic activity. In fact, compared to all other emerging markets, we're coming less in terms of out of this great recession that we've seen in 2008. We are lagging in many measures, including the rate at which we borrowed, which has not caused the economic activity to come through. This is not the time to be talking about tax, particularly taxing the corporates. It's the time to be lowering the corporates. Remember, when you lower taxes, you're stimulating the economy, and that will generate employment, and hopefully it'll be growing towards potential.
All right, so we're in the slow lane, and you're hoping for something radical. Thank you so much for your analysis. Lesiba Mothatha from Investment Solutions.
Indeed.
And that, unfortunately, all we have time